Tyree Collins was just walking home. No crime, no noise, just a hoodie and headphones. Then came the screech of tires, and a white cop's knee in his back. No body cam, no warning, just handcuffs and blood on the pavement. By morning, headlines read, "Black teen assaults officer." But what the footage didn't show would burn the whole city down. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The pavement was still wet from the late summer rain. Street lamps flickered weakly over cracked sidewalks and shuttered corner stores in a quiet South Atlanta neighborhood. Tyree Collins, 17, honors student and part-time grocery clerk, walked home with his headphones in and his hoodie up. Not because he was hiding, but because it was drizzling. He'd just finished a late shift at Melvin's Market. His shoes were soaked, his mind on tomorrow's history exam, and his stomach growled from skipping dinner. He had a scholarship interview coming up. Everything had to go right. A car pulled up beside him without headlights. He barely noticed it. Tyree turned into his usual shortcut through an alley behind a laundromat. When he heard tires screech, a voice barked, "Get on the ground, now." Before Tyree could even turn, he was tackled. Face first into the wet asphalt. A sharp grinding pain shot through his cheekbone. He couldn't see who was on him. Someone big, heavy. The man yanked Tyree's arms behind his back with such force his shoulder popped. "Stop resisting," the man screamed, though Tyree hadn't moved except to cry out. "I didn't do anything," Tyree gasped. His voice cracked with confusion and fear. The man's knee dug into his spine. Metal cuffs clicked on his wrists. "Black male in a hoodie. Matches the description," the man muttered into a radio. That was the entire justification. It wasn't until Tyree was lifted roughly to his feet that he saw the man's face. Mid-40s, buzz cut, square jaw. Detective Brent Lawson. Off duty. Out of uniform. He wore a leather jacket over a badge clipped to his belt. The kind of man whose presence shouted authority before he even spoke. Lawson didn't offer an explanation or an apology. He didn't tell Tyree what he was accused of. He just stared at him like Tyree was a loaded weapon that might still go off. Tyree's lip was split open, dripping blood onto his hoodie. His backpack with his algebra notes and resume inside was thrown to the side like evidence. The street was empty. The laundromat's security lights flickered off. No one had seen what happened. No cameras, no witnesses. "Why are you doing this?" Tyree asked, trembling. His knees barely held him upright. Lawson didn't answer. He just shoved him into the back of his unmarked car, radioed something in a low voice, and drove. At the precinct, the tone shifted, but not in Tyree's favor. Inside the booking room, two officers looked surprised when Lawson brought him in. "What's this?" one asked. Lawson shrugged. "Caught him lurking in the alley. Said he lunged at me when I questioned him." Tyree's eyes widened. "That's a lie. I didn't even—" "Quiet," Lawson snapped, louder than necessary. He got aggressive. Resisted detainment. Assaulted a peace officer. You know how it is. No one questioned it. The officer behind the desk sighed and began typing. Another grabbed a disposable camera and took a mugshot. Tyree looked stunned, still bleeding. No one offered a tissue. He was fingerprinted, told to remove his shoelaces, and placed in a holding cell. His phone buzzed in Lawson's pocket. Lawson had confiscated it without saying a word. His mother, Lena, had texted 3 times, "You home yet?" Then, "Getting worried, baby. Please respond." Hours passed in silence. Tyree sat in the cold metal cell, hugging himself. The air smelled of bleach and despair. Across from him, an older black man in another cell whispered, "You ain't the first, son. You won't be the last." He gave a hollow chuckle. Tyree didn't respond. He was trying to replay the moment, over and over in his head, trying to find the part where he had made a mistake. But there wasn't one. He hadn't said a word before Lawson tackled him. There'd been no warning, no explanation. Around 3 a.m., a tired clerk finally processed the paperwork. Tyree was charged with resisting arrest and assaulting a law enforcement officer. He was also labeled a potential flight risk, meaning no immediate bail. There were no fingerprints from a crime scene, no witness statements, no photos, just one officer's version of events. That was enough. Tyree finally got to make a call. His voice shook as he reached Lena. She screamed when she heard what happened, then raced to the station. But by then he was being transferred to a county holding facility. At sunrise, he was moved in shackles, wearing a paper-thin jumpsuit, his face still bruised. He was a boy who'd never so much as cheated on a test, now labeled a criminal before a single court date. Meanwhile, Lawson filled out his incident report back at the precinct. He checked boxes like he was ordering fast food. Suspect became agitated. Suspect attempted to flee. Suspect resisted physical restraint. A quick tap of the keyboard. A few vague phrases. It read like a script. But Lawson had made a mistake. One small slip in the report. A detail that wouldn't matter now, but would later. He wrote, the suspect had a tattoo on his left hand. Tyree didn't have any tattoos. He'd never even held a marker too long in class without scrubbing it off. At the courthouse the next morning, Lena sat with clenched fists. She watched people shuffle in and out, hoping anyone would help her son. She had no legal training, no connections, just faith and fear. Then a clerk called Tyree's name. A man in a wrinkled suit with a coffee-stained tie looked up lazily from his phone. Collins? Yeah, I'm his public defender. Harold Dobbs, he mumbled to no one in particular. He didn't look at Lena, didn't shake her hand, just walked toward the courtroom. He didn't ask Tyree what happened, didn't mention a defense strategy. And as the courtroom doors creaked open, Tyree turned to his mother and whispered, he didn't even ask me what happened. That morning as Tyree walked to his seat in court, face bruised, spirit frayed, he realized something chilling. His own lawyer hadn't even asked if he was innocent. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly as Tyree Collins sat silently in a stiff wooden chair, wrists still sore from the cuffs the night before. The courtroom smelled like dust and coffee. Old, indifferent, and slow. Across from him sat Harold Dobbs, his court-appointed lawyer, who looked as if he'd just rolled out of a restless nap in his car. His suit was a poor shade of beige, wrinkled and too tight at the waist, like it belonged to a version of himself from better years. He opened Tyree's file and barely glanced through the papers, eyes flicking without interest. First charge? Dobbs mumbled, not even looking up. Tyree nodded slowly, nervous and raw. Yes, sir. I didn't do anything, though. He just grabbed me. Dobbs let out a tired sigh and leaned back. Look, I've been doing this a long time. You don't fight these things, especially not when a cop's involved. Plead guilty. Best case scenario, they give you community service. Worst case, probation. Tyree blinked in disbelief. But I didn't resist. He didn't even say why he was stopping me. Now Dobbs did look at him, but not with sympathy. With boredom. Doesn't matter. His word's enough. He says you resisted. Then you resisted. They'll take his badge over your voice every time. It's how the system works. Lena, who had been quietly fuming behind them, leaned forward, her voice trembling but sharp. You're not even going to ask him what happened. You haven't asked about cameras, or if there were witnesses. I have 23 other cases this week, Dobbs snapped. You want me to start hiring investigators? For what? So a jury can ignore it anyway. Lena stood. Her voice rose, brittle but burning with fury. My son's life is not a time slot. He's not just another file for you to breeze through. He was walking home. That officer assaulted him. Watch yourself, Dobbs cut her off with a warning edge. You want him to get 10 years? That's the real risk if we push this. There was silence. Even the court clerk stopped typing for a moment. Tyree looked down at the floor, his body still aching from the slam, his face tight from healing cuts. In his mind, the moment played on a loop. The car, the shout, the pavement, the cuffs. He hadn't done anything, and yet here he was, told to admit guilt just to avoid worse. Dobbs closed the file and stood. Talk it over. But if we plead not guilty, you're betting your whole future that a jury's gonna take your side over a cop's. Think hard about that. He walked off, leaving mother and son in silence. Lena sat back down slowly, her chest rising and falling as she tried to breathe. Baby, she whispered, we'll find someone else. We'll get someone who actually gives a damn. Tyree didn't answer. His mouth felt dry. The fear in his gut had grown into something heavier. Resignation. No one's gonna care, Mom, he said quietly. He doesn't. The judge won't. They've already decided. At school, the fallout was swift and silent. The principal's office issued a formal notice of indefinite suspension pending the court outcome. Tyree's face, once on the wall, under Student Excellence Awards, had been taken down. Friends stopped texting. Teachers no longer made eye contact. The cafeteria that once buzzed with greetings had turned into a courtroom of whispers. Everyone had already heard about the incident, but no one asked Tyree what actually happened. His job at Melvin's Market vanished too. The store manager, a wiry white man named Pete, who once called Tyree one of the good ones, said, "We're gonna have to let you sit out for a while. Just till the air clears, you know." But Tyree knew. The air never really cleared, not when your name was printed in a police log. Lena spent every evening on the phone, dialing lawyers, community advocates, even local pastors. Everyone listened, some with pity, some with practiced empathy, but no one stepped forward. One lawyer whispered, "I'd love to help, but the officer involved, he's protected. There's pressure not to take that kind of case around here." She cried silently in the kitchen, one night as Tyree stared at the ceiling fan above his bed, watching the blades spin without end. His scholarship interview had been cancelled. His favorite teacher had removed him from the college prep group chat. Everything he had worked toward, every late-night study session, every shift at the store, every extra credit assignment, crumbled in 3 days. All because one man said he looked suspicious. And then came the courtroom again. It was Tyree's second appearance, and Lena had sewn a new collar on his only dress shirt to make him look presentable. "They judge us the moment we walk in," she murmured, as she adjusted his tie. "But let them see you're more than they think." They sat and waited. Dobbs was late. The courtroom buzzed with morning chatter, as other cases were called. Across the aisle, a black boy about Tyree's age was cuffed and led away. Another sat silently beside a translator, tears in his eyes. Finally the judge entered. He shuffled papers, adjusted his glasses, and called Tyree's name. No one stood. The judge looked over the top of his file. "Where is counsel for the defense?" The bailiff checked the hallway. "Not here yet, Your Honor." Lena shot up, voice anxious. "He said he'd be here. He promised." "We'll allow 3 minutes," the judge said, annoyed. "After that we proceed without him." Lena turned to her son, her panic rising. "Tyree, do you want to ask for a different lawyer? This isn't right. We can Tyree shook his head slowly. "Does it matter?" The 3 minutes passed, then 4. Dobbs never appeared. "We're proceeding," the judge declared. "This is a procedural hearing. The defendant may represent himself." Tyree stood, unsteady. Every part of his body screamed to sit back down. "I don't know what to say." "Then I recommend silence," the judge said curtly. Detective Brent Lawson was called to the stand. He walked in crisp polished with confidence that filled the room. He raised his right hand, swore an oath, and began recounting the night. "Subject was acting erratic," he said. "Refused to stop, became aggressive, lunged at me, threatened to escape. I restrained him using department protocol." And then, almost casually, he added, "Suspect had tattoos on his left hand and forearm, gang-related symbols. From what I could tell." Tyree's jaw dropped. He didn't have any tattoos. None. Never had. He'd been terrified of needles since he was a kid. Even marker doodles gave him anxiety. The court reporter typed steadily, unfazed. The judge barely blinked, but someone noticed. A young black woman in a gray blazer, sitting silently in the back of the courtroom, scribbled something on a yellow legal pad. She folded the note, handed it to the bailiff, and whispered something in his ear. He nodded and began walking toward the judge. Tyree followed the note with his eyes, confused and breathless. Then he looked at the woman, and for the first time since his arrest, since the alley, the cuffs, the silence, someone looked at him not like a threat but like a human being worth saving. As the judge unfolded the note on his bench and glanced toward the gallery, Tyree realized this stranger might be the only person in that courtroom who truly believed he was innocent. The courtroom had the cold stillness of a place built, not for people but for procedure. Light filtered in through high windows, gray and lifeless, casting long shadows across the polished wood. The air was sharp with formality, as though compassion had been filtered out along with the dust. Tyree Collins sat at the defendant's table, his hands folded in his lap, eyes darting nervously toward the double doors. No Dobbs. Again. The same chair that had sat empty the week before remained so, and the court clerk didn't bother hiding her indifference this time. She glanced at the clock, jotted something down on her legal pad, and passed a note to the judge. The Honorable Wayne Halbrook adjusted his glasses and sighed. "This is the third delay due to counsel absence," he muttered without looking at Tyree. "We proceed. Court backlog cannot accommodate further tolerance." Tyree's breath caught in his throat. "But Your Honor, I don't have anyone." "You will speak for yourself," or not at all. The judge interrupted, unmoved. This is a pre-trial evidentiary hearing. The facts will speak, the law will decide. A beat of silence passed, thick and cruel. From the gallery, Lena sat trembling, watching helplessly, her son alone in front of the state, a child facing a machine. The bailiff called the witness. Detective Brent Lawson strode in with the confidence of a man who knew this room, knew its rules, and knew it would protect him. His badge caught the light like a mirror, but his face remained unreadable. He sat tall, straight-backed, with a practiced stillness that conveyed authority. He was sworn in. He cleared his throat, and he began. On the evening in question, I was off duty and traveling through the Baker Street district when I observed a young man, later identified as the defendant, acting in a manner that was erratic and evasive. I exited my vehicle and approached, identifying myself as a law enforcement officer. The subject immediately became agitated. He refused verbal commands and lunged at me in a threatening posture. Tyree stared at the floor. That word again, lunged, like he was an animal, not a boy. I used appropriate force to restrain him. No baton, no taser. He resisted, verbally and physically. I performed a citizen's arrest under Georgia statute. The judge nodded along as if he'd already memorized this version of events. The court reporter typed steadily, the rhythm of keys almost hypnotic. Then Lawson continued, glancing toward the jury box. 7 white jurors, 2 black, 3 ambiguous enough to make statistics feel less uncomfortable. The subject had gang-related tattoos on his left hand and lower arm, symbols consistent with sets operating in the area. That, combined with his behavior and refusal to comply, led me to consider him a threat. Tree's head snapped up. Tattoos? He blinked, confused. He had no tattoos. Not a dot. Not even a drawing. Excuse me, Tyree said, his voice cracking as he spoke up. That's not true. I don't have any tattoos. Silence. The judge barked. You will wait your turn or forfeit the right to speak entirely. Lena clutched the edge of her seat, ready to scream. But she didn't. Not yet. Lawson didn't correct himself. He didn't even blink. He simply leaned back in the chair, as if the courtroom air itself would press his lies into the record with enough weight. Tyree felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He knew the truth. But here, truth felt weightless, like paper in a storm. The jury looked at him, but with vacant expressions. One older white man squinted. A middle-aged woman clutched her purse closer. Not one leaned forward, with concern. Not one took notes. They watched the scene unfold like an old rerun. Do you see the defendant in the courtroom today? The prosecutor asked. Lawson pointed. Yes. He's sitting there. Same hoodie, same demeanor. Tyree clenched his fists beneath the table. That hoodie, the same one that soaked in blood the night he was arrested, had been thrown away days ago.
No one questioned that. No one asked for evidence. No photos were entered. Just words. Just power.
The judge looked at Tyree. Do you have any questions for the witness? The room went quiet. Lena leaned forward, whispering a prayer into her hands. Tyree stood slowly. His knees felt weak, but his voice, though shaky, carried a steady pain. Sir, he began, you said I had tattoos. I don't. You said I lunged. I didn't. I didn't even have a chance to speak to you before I was on the ground. Lawson gave a faint smirk, not even looking at him. Tyree's eyes began to glass over. You never asked my name. You didn't say anything. You saw me, and you decided I was the threat. Is there a question in there? The judge asked, impatient. Tyree's voice rose, just enough to fight the fear. Why did you say I had tattoos? Lawson blinked, just once. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, his polish cracked, just a hairline fracture. I may have mistaken markings. It was dark, he said, his tone less certain now. Tyree stepped forward instinctively before catching himself. It wasn't dark. It was outside a laundromat, with motion lights. You tackled me under a street lamp. You knew what you saw, or didn't. The prosecutor quickly interjected. Objection. Speculation. The judge sustained it, tapping the gavel once. Enough. This court is not for theatrics. Defendant, sit down. But the room had shifted. The jury, while still quiet, had started to see the edges of something not quite clean. And in the far back, the same law intern who passed the note earlier was scribbling furiously in her notebook. Tyree sat down slowly, sweat beading on his neck, heart pounding. He'd never felt smaller, never more exposed. Yet inside, something flickered, a stubborn ember of resistance. Maybe it wasn't enough to burn down the lies, but it was heat. It was real. The judge leaned back, clearly annoyed by the delay. This hearing is adjourned. The trial date stands. Court is dismissed. Everyone began to shuffle out, some stretching like they'd just watched a boring movie. Lena rushed forward to hold her son, wrapping her arms around him tightly, as if to hold him together before he shattered. But across the room, Brent Lawson was still at the stand, grabbing his jacket when the court reporter quietly approached him. She held out her transcript, eyes narrowed. "You said he had tattoos," she said softly, as if curious. Lawson glanced at the transcript. His face went still. Did I say that?" he asked, confused now. The reporter nodded. Exactly that. And for the first time since the arrest, Brent Lawson didn't look like a man who owned the room. As Lawson stepped off the stand, still rattled, Tyree caught his eye, and the officer looked away. Not with power, but with something else. Something unfamiliar. The echo of footsteps faded, as the courtroom slowly emptied, but the tension lingered like smoke after a fire. Tyree remained seated, his shoulders tense, heart still hammering in his chest. Lena hovered beside him, her hand resting lightly on his back, whispering, "You did good, baby. You told the truth." But Tyree didn't feel proud. He felt cornered. The system had spoken in cold, clipped phrases. Objection. Sustained. Sit down. And Lawson, despite the stammer over the imaginary tattoos, still walked freely, still wore his badge, still held the power to twist words into weapons. That badge was more than metal. It was a shield against accountability. It covered the cracks, painted over the rock. In the gallery, a low murmur had begun during Lawson's testimony, the kind that grows not from noise but from discomfort. A few heads had turned. Some jurors had exchanged glances. One of them, a Latina woman in a navy blouse, had even leaned forward slightly during Tyree's trembling rebuttal. Small things. But in a room like this, small things were tremors beneath the surface. Lena noticed it too. As Tyree gathered his things, she stepped aside, reaching for her phone. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through contact after contact. Community leaders, church friends, even a retired teacher who once taught criminal justice. Nobody picked up. The system moved faster than her prayers. Then, as she lowered her phone in defeat, someone tapped her shoulder. It was the court clerk, an older black woman with careful braids and tired eyes. She didn't speak, just slipped Lena a folded piece of paper and walked away without turning back. Lena unfolded the note slowly. The handwriting was rushed, but the words were unmistakable. "Ask for a recess. This officer has a past." Her breath caught. She looked up, trying to spot the clerk again, but she was already gone behind the swinging courtroom doors. Lena turned the paper over, hoping for more. Nothing. She whispered to Tyree, "What if this means something? What if someone finally sees him for what he is?" Tyree shrugged, exhausted. "It won't matter. They'll cover it up like they always do." But Lena wasn't ready to surrender. They returned the next morning for a closed evidentiary hearing, scheduled to determine whether Lawson's testimony would be admissible in full. Dobbs, the absentee lawyer, finally arrived, half an hour late, his tie hanging crooked, and his eyes glazed. He barely acknowledged Tyree. The judge didn't reprimand him either, just nodded and said, "Let's proceed." Lena stood quickly. "Your Honor, I respectfully request a recess to submit a motion." The judge held up his hand without looking at her. "You are not counsel, ma'am. Sit down or be removed." Dobbs blinked in confusion. "What motion?" he whispered. She ignored him. Instead, she walked to the side of the room and approached the intern from the previous hearing. The same woman who had scribbled notes when Lawson first lied about the tattoos. "Please," Lena whispered. "There's something about that officer. Someone gave me a note. Said he has a past." The intern's eyes widened slightly. She looked around, leaned in, and whispered, "Internal affairs files are sealed unless a complaint is filed. But I've heard whispers. You didn't hear it from me." Lena stepped back, heart racing. She turned to Dobbs. "You have to ask about his record. Push for it. Do your job." He shook his head lazily. "It's inadmissible. I can't just go fishing." Lena grabbed his sleeve, then cast the net. "Because he's lying, and someone in this court knows it." Meanwhile, Lawson sat calmly in the witness box again, flipping through a notepad as if preparing for a casual briefing. His expression was confident, until the prosecutor handed him an updated copy of his prior statements. "Detective Lawson," she said, voice smooth. "Can you confirm the defendant's appearance again for the court?" He paused. For the first time, he seemed unsure. Yes. Medium build. Hoodie, jeans, tattoos on the hand." There it was again. "Tattoos?" the prosecutor pressed, raising an eyebrow. "Even though we now know based on intake photos that the defendant has none?" Lawson stiffened. "I must have confused him with a prior suspect." The lighting was poor. The courtroom murmured again, this time louder. The judge cleared his throat. "Order, please." But the tension had cracked open. Something that couldn't be sealed. Lena rose halfway from her seat, rage creeping up her spine. "He's lying," she said under her breath. Dobbs shifted in his seat, finally sensing danger. "Please sit down." Lena didn't. She stood fully. Her voice rose. "He's lying." All eyes turned. The judge slammed his gavel. "Ma'am, you are out of order." "No, he's out of order," she shouted. "You're letting him stand there and make up stories. He said my son had tattoos. Twice. That's not a mistake. That's a lie. He knew what he was doing." The bailiff moved toward her. "Let her speak," someone in the gallery whispered. "She's telling the truth," another added. The judge stood. "Remove her from the court. I hold you in contempt." Tyree jumped from his seat. "Don't touch her. She didn't do anything." But it was too late. The bailiff grabbed Lena's arm, leading her toward the exit. Her eyes locked with her son's, fierce and full of fire. "You keep fighting," she said. "You don't let them bury you in lies." The door slammed shut behind her. The room returned to its cold rhythm. But the energy had changed. Something had shifted. The badge had cracked, not shattered, not yet, but it had bent under the weight of a single mother's fury. And in that fracture, something dangerous was beginning to slip through. Truth. As Lena was escorted down the courthouse hallway in handcuffs, a quiet voice called after her. "Mrs. Collins, meet me after. I think I can help you." It was the intern. And she wasn't just a law student. She was a whistleblower's daughter. The steel doors clanged shut behind Lena Collins, their echo ricocheting through the courthouse like a slap. Her wrists burned against the cold cuffs. But it wasn't the metal that left her raw. It was the silence of the room she had just been dragged from. A silence too familiar, too rehearsed, the kind that always followed a black mother's scream in a white man's institution. But somewhere in that courtroom, just before the bailiff gripped her arm, a phone had been angled discreetly behind a notepad. The intern in the gray blazer, Amani Graves, wasn't just watching anymore. Her hands had trembled, but her conviction had not. She tapped record as Lena stood, voice cracking but unbroken. "He's lying. You're letting him lie about my son." That clip, just 11 seconds long, would spark a blaze the court never saw coming. By the time Lena was processed for contempt, fingerprinted, fined, released, it had already begun spreading. Imani uploaded it to a private law school forum, captioned, "Witnessed this today. Something feels off about this case." Someone reposted it, then another, then dozen. Hours later, the video hit Twitter, then Instagram, then TikTok. It was titled simply, "Black Mom Pleads for Her Son. Judge ejects her for speaking truth." The internet did not stay silent. Hashtags surged by midnight. "Unfreed Ree, Lena was right," and a brutal one that stuck like a scar. "Lawson lies." Within a day, the clip hit 2.3 million views. Celebrities reposted. Civil rights attorneys started commenting. Activists launched threads unpacking the case in real time. Notice how the officer mentions gang tattoos multiple times, on a minor with no record and no ink. One tweet read, followed by a side-by-side image of Tyree's intake photo. Clean hands, blank arms. Others dissected the courtroom exchange. Judge silences the boy. Dismisses the mother. Lets the cop lie without challenge. Classic pipeline, wrote another. The public was watching now. The courtroom's silence had betrayed them, but the world outside had ears. News outlets caught wind within days. Local stations ran segments. Mother's outburst draws attention to police bias case. Then came national outlets. CNN, MSNBC. Even Fox covered it, though with a tone of suspicion. And then the real blow dropped. A small independent journalist, named Raina Waters, known for her investigative threads on police corruption, did what no one inside the court had dared. She dug into Brent Lawson's past. What she found made the hashtags explode. 3 prior complaints, all buried, all eerily similar. Case 1, 2015. A Latino teen in a traffic stop left with a broken wrist and resisting arrest charges. The city settled quietly. Case 2, 2018. A black college freshman stopped for acting suspicious near his dorm. No charges filed, but internal affairs flagged Lawson's aggressive conduct. Case 3, 2020. A white woman reported that Lawson called her biracial nephew a future felon during a noise complaint. Her complaint was closed due to insufficient evidence. Each case swept under the rug. No suspensions, no disciplinary action, just quiet settlements and sealed reports. But now they weren't sealed. Raina posted scanned documents, redacted testimonies, and handwritten complaints on her Substack and Twitter. Her headline read, "The badge that always survives. What Brent Lawson's history reveals about Tyree Collins' future." The article went viral in under 3 hours. Donations began pouring into Lena's GoFundMe. Protest flyers surfaced across downtown Atlanta. Marches were scheduled. Lawyers started calling real lawyers. Tyree, still stunned, sat at home scrolling through the chaos. His face was now on banners and profile pics. His name printed on signs and shirts. For the first time, the world was saying what he and Lena had shouted into the void. He didn't do this. And yet, amidst the noise, one comment rose above all others. It appeared beneath the original video clip, barely noticeable at first. Yunlane. Cade Whitaker. The comment read, "I was disbarred for challenging cases like this. If no one else will defend him, I will." No profile photo, no bio, just a sentence. Cold, unshaken. Umani saw it first. She clicked the username, but the account had already been deleted. A burner maybe. Or maybe someone watching very carefully. She searched the name, Cade Whitaker. A headline surfaced from 4 years ago. Rogue civil rights lawyer barred from practice after exposing Atlanta PD internal memos. Imani's heart raced. She read on. Whitaker had been a fierce defense attorney once, known for taking impossible cases against impossible odds. He won 3 high-profile suits against officers in Georgia alone, but his downfall came when he leaked evidence of internal misconduct in the police department, exposing altered arrest reports and racial profiling patterns. He was dragged through legal fire, disbarred, and vanished from public life. Now he was watching again. And maybe, just maybe, he was ready to return. That night, Tyree refreshed the page and saw the comment. He leaned back slowly, something foreign passing through his chest. Hope, but the kind that hurt to feel. Lena came into the room, holding her phone. People are calling. Reporters, lawyers, even a pastor from out in Decatur says they want to speak on your behalf. Tyree looked at her, voice hesitant. Did you see this guy? Cade Whitaker? She nodded slowly. I remember him. Years ago. Took on a crooked sheriff and made him fold. They destroyed him for it. Tyree said nothing, but the words replayed in his head like a drum. If no one else will defend him, I will. At 2:13 a.m., Lena's phone buzzed. A private number. She answered, cautious. A gruff voice came through. I saw the video. Meet me at the old McPherson Library tomorrow. Bring your son. No one else. It was Cade Whitaker. And he hadn't stepped inside a courtroom in 4 years. The old McPherson Library hadn't had a book inside its walls in almost a decade. What once held encyclopedias and youth poetry nights now reeked of mildew and cracked linoleum. The city never demolished it, too expensive. So it sat like a fossil in the heart of Atlanta, forgotten by time, surrounded by new condos and polished sidewalks that avoided eye contact with its decay. But inside that ruin, under flickering exit signs and graffiti-covered walls, waited a man who had once been the terror of every badge that lied and every judge that shrugged. Cade Whitaker. Lena walked in first, protective and cautious, scanning every shadow. Tyree followed, hoodie up, still unsure if this was a trap or a miracle. They found him sitting in the corner beneath a broken fluorescent light, a worn briefcase by his feet, and a paper coffee cup balanced on the edge of a dusty desk. He looked up, eyes sunken but sharp, hair graying at the temples, unshaven. His presence wasn't polished, but it was undeniable, like a man who'd already survived the war and was ready to go back in, just to prove he could. Mrs. Collins. Mr. Collins, he said, standing. You made it. Lena didn't shake his hand right away. You the one who posted that comment? Cade smirked. Guilty. though I don't usually make offers in comment sections. That's how desperate this situation looks. Tyree studied him. Why would you want to help me? You don't even know me. Cade stepped closer, voice low. Because I know them. And they hate me even more than they hate you. That wasn't bravado. It was fact. Cade had been one of the most formidable civil rights attorneys in Georgia. 5 years ago. He'd taken on police departments, sued counties into reform, and won cases everyone else called suicide. But when he leaked confidential internal affairs documents showing that over 20 officers, including Brent Lawson, had been shielded from prosecution for brutality, they didn't just strip his license. They buried him. No law firm would touch him after that. Judges refused to hear motions from his paralegal team. The state bar crucified him for ethical misconduct, but everyone knew it was revenge. Lena crossed her arms. You're disbarred. You can't represent him. No, Cade said. But I can build the case. I can assemble a team. I know people who still owe me. Tyree deserves a real defense, not a folding chair in a courtroom waiting to be crushed. Tyree hesitated. Why now? Why me? Cade's voice dropped an octave. Because they picked the wrong kid to railroad. That viral video cracked something. Lawson's name is being whispered again. The city's trying to keep it quiet, but I can smell the fear. If we act now, while the world's watching, we can make them bleed truth. Lena still looked unsure. What do you want in return? One thing, Cade said. Tyree has to tell me everything. No omissions. No edits. No trying to sound innocent. I can't build a defense around a lie. Tyree nodded. Slow at first, then firmer. I don't need to lie. I didn't do anything. Cade sat back down and opened the briefcase. It was filled with folders, printed screenshots of Lawson's misconduct reports, legal strategy outlines, and a laptop covered in scratches. He pulled up a browser, typing quickly. Lawson's testimony is already cracking. But I want more. There were city cameras at the intersection where you were stopped. Traffic poles. Business fronts. I filed a request for surveillance data through a proxy. He turned the screen. Footage loaded. A grainy black and white view of the street from 2 angles. Tyree could just make out his own figure, walking down the sidewalk. Alone. Calm. No suspicious behavior. No running. This proves he lied, Lena whispered. But then Cade clicked the next file. Error. File corrupted. He tried another. Same result. Cade leaned back slowly. I pulled this directly from the city's server cache before it was wiped. Someone scrubbed the originals. I only got a fragment. Who? Tyree asked, tense. Could have been anyone in the department, Cade said. Or Lawson himself. He still has friends on the inside. Tyree felt his throat tighten. They're really doing all this just to protect him? No, Cade said grimly. They're doing it to protect the system. Lawson is just the symptom. You're the target. But I promise you, if we do this right, we'll turn you into the cure. He stood, grabbing his coat. I'm going to file a motion through a licensed proxy attorney I trust. We'll demand the chain of custody on that footage. If they destroyed it, we'll make it public. If they altered it, we'll charge them. Tyree stood too, taller now, a hint of something stronger in his eyes. And then what? He asked. Cade smiled, not kindly, strategically. Then we tear their house down, one false brick at a time. Lena stepped forward, finally shaking his hand. You're really in this? Cade held her gaze. I've already lost everything they could take. That makes me dangerous. He paused, grabbing a manila envelope from his briefcase. Inside is a list of people we need to talk to. Teachers, co-workers, a gas station clerk. If Lawson's got a reputation in that neighborhood, I'll find it. Tyree opened the envelope. Tucked between the pages was a photo. Lawson at a retirement party, with 2 men Cade had circled in red. Tyree recognized one of them. He'd seen him before, on the night of his arrest. Across the street, smoking a cigarette near a dark sedan. Wait, Tyree said, holding the photo. That guy, he was there that night. He saw it happen. Cade stopped. Are you sure? Tyree nodded. He looked right at me before Lawson grabbed me. Cade exhaled. Then we have a witness. Or at least a lead. He placed a hand on Tyree's shoulder. This just got interesting. That evening, Cade emailed a private investigator to track the man in the photo. Within hours, the reply came back. Subject confirmed. Former cop. Transferred to Florida. Guess who signed the transfer? Detective Brent Lawson. Someone had been buried, and Cade was ready to dig. It began with a whisper inside a hard drive. Data fragments buried beneath corrupted files, surveillance loops, and overwritten timestamps. But Cade Whitaker's tech expert Milo Tran wasn't interested in the surface. He knew how to dig through digital rubble like an archaeologist sifting through ancient bones. In the back room of a cluttered repair shop near Edgewood, Milo hovered over a workstation lit only by the faint green glow of code, his eyes darting behind thick glasses. Cade stood behind him, arms crossed, watching as images flickered across the screen. Distorted shadows, frozen frames, pixelated outlines of storefronts. "There," Milo said, freezing the footage. Cade leaned in. Tyree was visible. Hood up, backpack slung, hands in his pockets, walking steadily along the sidewalk. Nothing erratic, no lunging, no sudden moves, just a teenage boy walking home in the rain. Then another figure appeared, stepping into the edge of the frame. Lawson, off-duty, but purposeful, hand near his belt, eyes fixed like he'd already made a decision. "What happened next?" Cade asked. Milo pressed a key. The video jumped 4 seconds skipped. "Wait, what?" Cade barked. "Why the jump?" "That's where the corruption hits," Milo explained. "Someone tampered with this file. The data isn't naturally lost. It's been overwritten." Cade's jaw clenched. Deliberately. Definitely. Probably done remotely. Whoever accessed this camera knew what they were doing. Cade stared at the frame. Tyree just steps away from being grabbed. The moment before impact had been erased. The truth reduced to static, but what remained was still powerful. Tyree was not running. He wasn't aggressive. There was no reason for an arrest. He didn't need the missing 4 seconds to prove that. Cade burned the footage to multiple drives. He didn't trust clouds. Not anymore. That evening, in Lena's living room, Tyree watched the footage with a numb expression. "That's me," he said quietly. "I remember that exact second." Lena watched too, jaw clenched. They took the part where it all happened. The part that matters most. "No," Cade said, pacing. "They took the part that would incriminate him." Lena turned. "So now what? We go to the DA? Show them this?" Cade shook his head. "We do show them, but not because they'll do the right thing. We show them to see if they'll bury it again." He scheduled a meeting the next day with the district attorney's office. They met in a high-ceilinged chamber downtown, where everything smelled like carpet cleaner and silence. The DA, Marjorie Glenn, was younger than expected. Black, polished, and unreadable. Her assistant, a white man in a tailored suit, remained silent as Cade placed the footage on the conference table. "This is recovered from a gas station camera 300 feet from the arrest location," Cade said. "This shows Tyree walking peacefully, calm. No threat, no resistance, no criminal behavior. The officer's justification was fabricated." Glenn watched, expression unmoved. When the footage ended, she didn't look up right away. When she did, she simply asked, "Where's the rest of it?" "Intentionally deleted," Cade said. "Then it's not complete," Glenn replied, "and incomplete evidence can't contradict sworn officer testimony." Cade leaned forward. "The burden of proof is on you, not him." Lawson said he feared for his life. "What part of that boy walking quietly proves any danger?" Glenn's assistant finally spoke. "It doesn't prove anything either way." "You're backing a lie," Cade snapped. "We're backing our officer," Glenn said. "Until we have definitive proof of misconduct, we are not dropping charges." Cade sat back. "So you're saying that even if the truth is almost visible, but not complete, you'll choose the lie that protects the institution?" Glenn didn't blink. "I'm saying we follow the law. Lawson is a decorated detective. Your client is a minor with no eyewitnesses. This footage, partial tampered, won't convince a jury, but it will complicate things. So I suggest you advise your client to consider a plea." Lena, sitting quietly until now, spoke. "You saw what he didn't do, but you still want to punish him." "It's not personal, Mrs. Collins," Glenn said, her voice colder now. "It's prosecutorial strategy." Cade's mouth curled, somewhere between a laugh and disgust. "I remember when you used to fight for people like Tyree. What happened?" Glenn didn't flinch. "I stopped trying to win battles I couldn't afford to lose." They left the building in silence. Tyree didn't speak until they reached the street. "I thought the truth mattered," he said. "I thought if we just proved it, they'd stop." Cade looked at him, his face unreadable. "You're still thinking this is about guilt?" Tyree stared. "It's not," Cade continued. This is about control, about who's allowed to walk free, and who isn't. They see the truth as dangerous, because it disrupts their balance. But I didn't do anything, Tyree said, a tremble in his voice. That's exactly why they won't let it go. That night, Cade sat alone at his motel desk, watching the footage on loop. He didn't need more proof, it was already there, glaring in every erased frame, in every missing second. But then he noticed something strange. Just before the footage skipped, in the final second before the glitch, a figure appeared in the background, across the street, near a dumpster, blurred but visible. Someone had been watching. Cade zoomed in, enhancing the image. A face, partially turned. It wasn't Lawson. It wasn't Tyree. It was the man from the photo, the former cop transferred to Florida. He'd seen everything. And now, Cade knew who could finally break the case wide open. The photo had led Cade Whitaker to a name, and the name led him down a trail no one in the DA's office or the police union wanted uncovered. 17. Arrested 2 years ago during a routine traffic stop that spiraled into what the report labeled aggressive resistance. Body cam footage was conveniently malfunctioning. Jalen had bruises across his neck and a cracked rib. The charges were eventually dropped, but no apology followed. The name hadn't drawn attention. Ross was his mother's maiden name. But the hyphenation on a school form Cade managed to pull from court records told the story clearly. Jalen was Brent Lawson's son, and no one in court had ever mentioned him. Cade's breath caught as he reread the birth certificate. It was tucked into a family court file from years earlier, sealed by request. Jalen had lived with his mother since age 6. Lawson never sought custody, only sent occasional child support, which stopped when Jalen turned 16. The file noted irreconcilable values in the relationship. Not values, Cade muttered to himself. Identity. He dug deeper. Jalen's mother, a social worker named Carmen Ross, had filed a complaint against Lawson in 2014, citing psychological harm and racially demeaning behavior toward her son. The court dismissed it, labeling the conflict domestic tension. But Cade saw it for what it was. Lawson hadn't just brutalized black boys in the streets. He'd failed to love his own son. Now that son was nearly the same age as Tyree. And Cade needed to find him. He followed the breadcrumbs, an address in Savannah, a transfer transcript from a community college, a job application at a record store downtown. 2 days later, he walked into the shop with fading album posters taped to the windows, and spotted Jalen, ringing up vinyl behind the counter, earbuds in, tall and cautious-eyed. Cade approached slowly. Jalen Ross? The boy turned. He had Lawson's jawline, but softer. A gentler version of the man who stood in court with lies like bullets. Jalen's eyes narrowed. Depends who's asking. My name's Cade Whitaker. I used to be an attorney. I'm working a case that involves your father. Jalen tensed. I don't have a father. Cade nodded, not challenging it. Understood. But I think you know what kind of man he is. And now someone else's life is hanging in the balance. Cade wasn't surprised. The internet was ablaze with it. You've seen the video? They stepped outside into the alley behind the shop, away from cameras and ears. Cade explained the details. The arrest, the fabricated tattoos, the missing footage, the system closing ranks. He watched Jalen closely as he spoke, gauging the flicker behind his eyes. Because you know him. Not as a cop, as a man. And you're not afraid to say what he is. Jalen's voice was steady, but his words cracked with buried pain. He taught me to fear blackness, even in myself. Told me I'd never be accepted by either side. He'd say things like, one day you'll see why the system works the way it does. Then he'd look me up and down like I wasn't his. Jalen continued. When I got arrested, he didn't call. Didn't come. Just told my mom I should have known better. That's who he is. You could help Tyree, Cade said carefully. Testify about what your father taught you, said to you. Give the jury a real portrait of the man behind that badge. Jalen chuckled bitterly. You think they'll listen to a mixed kid airing dirty laundry about his white father? A cop? They'll crucify me. Cade leaned in. Maybe. But if you don't speak, they'll crucify Tyree instead. And this time, silence won't save anyone. Jalen looked away. His hands trembled slightly. He's dangerous, he said finally. You think he'd hesitate to retaliate if I spoke up? I think he already did, Cade replied, showing him the tampered footage, the erased seconds, the internal affairs reports with Jalen's name never mentioned. This isn't about one boy. It's about every person your father thinks he can erase. Jalen exhaled slowly, staring at the sky. A long pause passed. Will you protect me? He asked. I'll do more than that, Cade said. I'll make damn sure the world sees you. Every word, every truth. If your father tried to bury your voice, we'll make it loud enough to shake the system. Jalen nodded slowly, resolve rising behind his eyes. I'll testify, he said, but you better keep your word, because the last man who swore he'd protect me was him. Later that night, Cade received an encrypted email from an anonymous account. Subject: Brent Lawson. Internal inquiry. Attached: a confidential personnel file. Inside was proof that Lawson had covered up a use of force complaint filed by Jalen's mother. Cade now had evidence of obstruction, and a witness ready to break everything open. There was a different electricity in the courtroom that morning, subtle but alive. The kind that buzzed beneath the skin, that hinted something irreversible was about to happen. Lena sat upright in the gallery, Tyree at her side, shoulders stiff, eyes alert. Cade stood at the defense table, a folder marked JRL, clutched under his arm. Across from him, the prosecution whispered tightly between clenched jaws, and at the center of it all sat Jalen Ross Lawson, in a pressed collared shirt, hands folded, gaze steady. He looked nothing like a pawn. He looked like the match that was about to set the institution ablaze. Please state your name for the record, Cade said from the defense table. Jalen spoke clearly. Jalen Ross Lawson. A small murmur rippled through the jury box. Cade stepped forward. Are you the biological son of Detective Brent Lawson? Yes. Have you lived with him at any point in the last 10 years? No. He signed off on full custody to my mother when I was 6. Did he remain in contact with you? Jalen's eyes didn't flicker. Barely. Only when he wanted to remind me of who he thought I was. Cade glanced at the jury, then back to Jalen. And who was that? Jalen leaned into the microphone. A mistake. A liability. And above all, a threat. Not because of what I'd done, but because of what I looked like. A gasp slipped from someone in the audience. Cade didn't stop. Can you elaborate on that? Jalen swallowed once. He used to say things like, you're lucky you've got light skin. Most boys like you end up cuffed by 17. He said I'd be stopped more than other kids. Told me if I ever talked back to a cop, even him, I'd deserve whatever came next. He paused, and when I got arrested 2 years ago, he didn't visit, didn't call, just said I should have kept my hands visible, that I knew the rules. The courtroom was still, but charged. The jury leaned in. Even the judge squinted, as if trying to decipher the weight behind every word. Would you describe your father as fair? Jalen's laugh was dry. Fair? No. Selective. Calculating. He doesn't see people. He sees control. He sees danger in anyone darker than a handshake at a country club. And what do you think he saw when he looked at Tyree Collins? Jalen looked across the room, meeting Tyree's eyes for a second. An easy target. A way to exercise power without consequence. Cade nodded slowly, letting the silence fill the room like smoke. Then he turned. Your witness, he said to the prosecution. But the assistant DA clearly rattled. Declined. No questions. Cade raised his eyebrows slightly, then addressed the judge. Defense requests to recall Detective Lawson to the stand. A moment passed. Then the judge nodded. Granted. Lawson rose stiffly from his seat. The badge on his lapel gleamed as he approached the witness box. But this time his movements were heavier, stiffer. His mouth tightened into a line too rigid to be natural. He took the oath, sat, and glanced toward Jalen, who refused to look away. Cade walked slowly to the stand, his voice measured, surgical. Detective Lawson, is it true you have a son named Jalen? Lawson's jaw clenched. Yes. Is it true you were aware of his arrest in... Yes. Did you visit him in custody? No. Why not? Lawson hesitated. We were estranged. Estranged because he's your son, or because he's biracial? Objection. The prosecution leapt up, but the judge raised a hand. Overruled. I'll allow it, within reason. Lawson's voice dropped. I have no issue with race. Then why did your son testify that you viewed him and black boys like him as threats? I don't control what he thinks, Lawson snapped. But you controlled what you said to him, what you modeled, what you enforced. I've never treated suspects differently due to race, Lawson insisted. Cade flipped through a file. Let's review. In 2015, you arrested a Hispanic teen who had no priors. Case settled. Unrelated. 2018. You stopped a black student outside his dorm. Case dropped. Complaint filed. Coincidence. 2020. Your ex filed a report that you used racially charged language in your home. That complaint was sealed until last week. Lawson's composure slipped. That has nothing to do with this case. Cade stepped closer. Everything has to do with this case. Because you didn't just arrest Tyree. You fabricated a story. You said he had gang tattoos. You erased part of the footage. You made the jury believe he was something to fear. Lawson's fists clenched on the stand. And you did it, Cade continued. Because like your son said, you've been conditioned to see black boys as suspects. Even your own blood. The room went quiet. Lawson finally snapped, his voice louder than it had been all trial. You don't know me. You think you can twist every call I've ever made into some kind of racism story. I've worn this badge for 20 years. I've saved lives. I've been ambushed, shot at, and you've lied under oath, Cade said, calm and brutal. Which makes you dangerous in uniform. The jury stirred. One juror whispered something to another. The tension had tipped. The man behind the badge wasn't untouchable anymore. He was human, fallible, and afraid. Suddenly, the assistant DA stood up, her tone sharp and desperate. Your Honor, the prosecution requests a recess. We have concerns regarding the witness's participation. Cade frowned. On what grounds? The DA stepped forward. We believe the defense may have improperly contacted the witness. We'd like to review communication between Mr. Whitaker and the witness known as Jalen Ross Lawson. Gasps echoed across the courtroom. Cade stood still. Witness tampering? The judge rubbed his temple, sighing heavily. Motion for recess granted. This court is in recess until tomorrow morning. Both parties will submit communication logs and relevant documents. He banged the gavel. Court adjourned. Chaos buzzed in the room. Tyree looked at Cade, stunned. Is this bad? Cade stared straight ahead, jaw set. It's not about what's true anymore, he said. They're scared. Which means we're getting close. Outside the courtroom, Jalen's phone buzzed. A private message. You don't know what you've started. Watch your back. It was from an unlisted number, and it traced back to an Atlanta Police Union account. The courtroom felt different the next morning. It wasn't just the packed gallery, or the armed bailiff standing closer to the jury box. It was the shift in Judge Halbrook's posture, less rigid, more reflective. The man who once regarded Tyree as another case in the stack now scanned the room with something else in his eyes. Doubt. Not in Cade. Not even in Lawson. But in the system he'd served for 30 years without question. He adjusted his glasses and tapped the bench once. Before we proceed, I am exercising judicial discretion, under Article 3-4 Discovery Integrity. I want the complaint history of Detective Brent Lawson, submitted to this court, in full, no redaction. The prosecution froze. Marjorie Glenn, the DA, stood slowly. Your Honor, that material is protected under departmental privilege and the judge cut her off. Not anymore. Gasps swept the courtroom like wind across a field. Cade leaned back in his chair, but his face remained unreadable. He'd seen judges waver before, but never flip. I also want an internal review of Officer Lawson's prior arrest reports involving minors. The judge continued. Specifically black or Latino males, age 17 and under. The clerk will initiate the request if the department stalls. Lawson, seated at the prosecution's table, suddenly looked pale. Cade stood, voice clear. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to present a sealed exhibit. It contains 3 internal memos, all dated within the last 6 years, outlining complaints filed against Officer Lawson, complaints that were flagged for further review but were later buried by departmental discretion. He walked toward the bench, handing over the envelope. The judge read in silence. The gallery strained to stay still, but whispers leaked through. 3 complaints dismissed within 30 days. 2 officers transferred after filing. 1 civilian payout, without public record. The judge read aloud. His jaw tightened. Glenn rose again. These are old claims. Settled. Irrelevant. They were hidden, Cade countered. The jury has a right to know if the lead witness has a pattern of racial profiling and evidence suppression, especially when his badge is the only thing keeping my client behind bars. Lena reached for Tyree's hand. He didn't move. He was too stunned by the moment, watching the room bend in his direction, not away from it. The judge stood slowly. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we will now review this exhibit as part of the court record. Please take note of the dates, names, and resolutions, or lack thereof. This is not about character assassination. It is about transparency. As the jury leaned in, Cade turned back to the gallery, meeting Amani's eyes. The law student turned whistleblower nodded subtly. Her research had formed the backbone of those documents, evidence the courtroom could no longer ignore. One juror, the older black man who had barely spoken during deliberations, cleared his throat and whispered to the woman beside him, "They tried to bury this. All of it." Suddenly, a slow clap erupted. Just one, then two more. The gallery was on its feet before the bailiff could stop them. Cheers, applause, whistles. Nothing rowdy, just raw relief. The dam had cracked. Judge Halbrook banged his gavel. "Order." I said order. The gallery returned to their seats, but the atmosphere had changed. This was no longer a trial. It was an uprising cloaked in formality. But just as Cade returned to his table, the DA dropped a grenade. "Your Honor," Glenn said, "we have newly discovered evidence." Cade froze mid-step. "It pertains to the night of the arrest. We received a late disclosure from APD's Digital Evidence Division. Apparently, Officer Lawson's body cam had partial data that was previously mislabeled in storage." Cade turned sharply. "That footage was reported lost. Scrubbed. So we thought," Glenn said. "But last night the department recovered a few minutes of video, timestamped near the alleged point of physical contact." Gasps again. Halbrook's face darkened. "Why are we just hearing about this now?" "It was buried under misfiled metadata," she replied. "We only received the recovery request late last evening. We're prepared to play it today. In full." Cade's blood ran cold. Because there was no scenario in which a department that had hidden footage for weeks suddenly found it. Unless it was a trap. Tyree leaned toward him. "What if it shows something? What if they edited it?" "They won't risk a full fabrication," Cade muttered. "But they'll splice it, twist it, remove the sound. Anything to make you look like the villain again." Glenn was already plugging in a USB. A large courtroom monitor flickered to life. Judge Halbrook looked down. "Mr. Whitaker, do you object to the submission?" Cade straightened. "I object on grounds of late disclosure and potential data manipulation." The judge exhaled. "Objection noted. But overruled. The court will view the footage." The lights dimmed. The screen played. Tyree appeared first, just as in the gas station footage. Hood up. Hands in pockets. Peaceful. Still. Then Lawson entered frame. The audio was muffled. Lawson's voice faintly audible. "Hey! Stop! Hold up!" Tyree turned. Then came the glitch. A skip. Tyree was suddenly mid-fall. Lawson already on top of him, yelling, "Stop resisting." No footage of the tackle. No footage of the exchange. Just the moment of force. Then a loop of audio escalation. Cade stood, furious. "That's not full footage. That's edited sequence. The confrontation is missing. The seconds before contact gone." The judge remained still. "Your Honor, this is staged," Cade continued. "The missing seconds contain the truth. What we're watching is an illusion, engineered to protect a lie." Glenn smiled faintly. "The footage came from Lawson's body cam directly. If you're suggesting he manipulated department property, you'll need evidence." "I will find it," Cade said coldly. "But until then, I want the original hard drive reviewed by an independent forensic analyst." The judge paused. For the first time, his silence felt protective. "I'll allow it," he said. "But this court is walking a fine edge. Truth must be balanced by process. If this footage is manipulated, we will expose it. But if it confirms the officer's version, the jury must weigh it fairly." Cade nodded. "That's all I ask." But he didn't believe it for a second. Because in that 10-second clip, Tyree had been reduced again, not to a student or son, but to a body on the ground. And the badge still gleamed. Back at his motel, Cade received a package on his doorstep. No return address. Inside, a flash drive. A post-it note stuck to it, handwritten in black marker. "This is what the DA didn't show. Play it." But not alone. It was labeled, "Lawson Cam, UN Cut." The flash drive sat in Cade Whitaker's palm, like a loaded weapon, small, black, and cold. He didn't open it at the motel. He took no chances. Instead, he called Milo, his trusted tech expert, and arranged a quiet meeting in a downtown co-working space that still had analog security and no digital trail, no Wi-Fi pings, no backup syncs, just a hard drive, a screen, and two people chasing the truth, with everything left to lose. Milo inserted the drive and waited. Cade leaned over his shoulder, arms crossed, jaw clenched. The file loaded instantly. Lawson Cam UN cut. Milo ran a diagnostic scan first. The footage had no government watermark, no APD chain of custody signature. Whoever leaked this had ripped it from the original source before it was edited and submitted to court.
Then they hit play.
At first it matched what the jury had seen. Tyree walking peacefully, Lawson entering frame. But then instead of a sudden skip, it continued. Audio. Clear. Tyree. Why are you following me? Lawson. You fit the description. Tyree of what? Lawson. A suspect. Don't question me. Hands where I can see them. Tyree. I didn't do anything. Lawson. You want to do this the easy way. Tyree. I'm just walking home. And then, abruptly, Lawson lunged. No provocation. No resistance. No threat. Tyree screamed. The footage shook violently as Lawson slammed him into the ground, shouting stop resisting. Even as Tyree lay motionless, arms splayed, Cade stepped back, breath held. This wasn't just misconduct. This was assault. This changes everything, he whispered. Milo nodded. And look, timestamp data's intact. This file wasn't edited. It's raw. You show this to the court, they'll have no choice. Cade picked up his phone and called Imani. Get the judge's clerk, now. Court resumed the next day with tension so thick it buzzed beneath the gallery benches. Reporters lined the rear walls. Civil rights observers filled the side aisles. Word had leaked, not the footage, but its existence. People wanted blood, justice, maybe both. Judge Halbrook entered with grave intensity. Mr. Whitaker, you requested an emergency evidentiary submission? Cade rose, nodding. Yes, Your Honor. I have in my possession uncut body cam footage, recorded from Officer Lawson's device on the night of Tyree Collins' arrest. This footage contradicts sworn testimony and previously submitted video. The DA objected instantly. Objection. This was not submitted through the department. Because your department buried it. Cade snapped. The judge waved his hand. Proceed, Mr. Whitaker. Cade inserted the drive into the court's projection system. The lights dimmed. The monitor glowed to life. Tyree's voice filled the courtroom, clear and desperate. I didn't do anything. Then the tackle. Then the screams. Then, silence. As the footage ended, the jury sat stunned. One juror, the woman in the second row, covered her mouth. Another looked away, jaw clenched. No one spoke. Cade turned to the judge. This is the truth you weren't meant to see. The officer didn't misremember. He didn't act in panic. He lied. The judge leaned forward, eyes fixed on the DA. Did your office know about this footage? Dia Glenn stood slowly. We received edited footage from the APD. We had no knowledge of this specific version. And Lawson? The judge asked. Lawson sat stiffly, eyes wide, a bead of sweat running down his temple. Cade pounced. Your Honor, I request to recall Detective Lawson to the stand for perjury. Gasps. The judge nodded. Granted. Lawson walked slowly to the stand, the weight of the badge finally pressing against his chest like a stone. You swore under oath that your submission to the department was full and unaltered, Cade said, pacing. Is that still your position? Lawson cleared his throat. I submitted the drive I was told to submit. By whom? I don't recall. You don't recall who instructed you to remove damning footage from your own body cam? I didn't remove anything, Lawson insisted. I just turned it in. Then why does this file show the exact moment you used force without cause? Why was it not included in court evidence? I don't know, Lawson snapped. Cade turned to the jury. But you knew what it would show. You knew if the world saw it, you'd lose everything. Lawson stared at him. Hollow. I did what I was trained to do. That statement struck like a hammer. Cade stepped forward, fire in his eyes. Then the training is broken, and so is every inch of authority that allowed this lie to live. You lied under oath. You altered evidence. You assaulted a child and hid it behind procedure. You don't deserve that badge. Judge Halbrook banged his gavel. Order. The courtroom buzzed with electric fury. The DA stood again, shaking her head. We move for a mistrial, Glenn said. The chain of evidence is tainted. The introduction of anonymous evidence threatens due process. Cade turned. A mistrial. After burying the truth for weeks, the judge looked between them. The silence grew heavy again. Jury, I am instructing you to step out while I consider motions, Halbrook said. Do not discuss the case. Bailiff will escort. The jury filed out, each face a portrait of disbelief. Cade stood still, chest heaving, rage simmering beneath composure. Tyree watched him, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. Lena clutched her son's hand. What happens now? Cade turned, slowly. I file federal charges, he said. Suppression of evidence, conspiracy, civil rights violation. He looked at Glenn, and I'll name every person who touched that file and stayed silent. As the courtroom emptied, Cade's phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. We need to talk. I was there the night it happened. I saw everything. And I wore a badge, too. The courtroom had never been this quiet. Not even during the damning playback of the uncut footage. Not during Cade's firestorm cross-examinations. Not even when Jalen Ross Lawson dismantled his father's legacy in front of a nation. But now all eyes were on Tyree Collins. He sat alone at the witness table, his hands folded, posture upright, shirt collar buttoned to the top. He wore the same shoes he had on the night he was arrested, worn-down sneakers that still bore a faint stain near the toe. Cade stood to the side, not hovering, just watching. There would be no prompting, no legal tricks. This wasn't about defense anymore. It was testimony. Please state your name, the judge said. Tyree Isaiah Collins. He answered steady. And your age? 17. Cade stepped forward, voice lower now. Mr. Collins, tell us in your own words, what happened that night. Tyree took a breath. Not shaky. Controlled. Deep. I left work at 10:12 p.m. I'd stayed late to clean the freezer at Melvin's Market. I walked the same route I always do. Down Henderson, then cut through the alley behind the laundromat. I had my headphones in. My hoodie was up. It was raining. He paused, looking briefly at the jury, then down at his own hands. I wasn't thinking about anything scary. Just school. My interview for the scholarship. I was replaying the questions in my head. Like, what's your biggest strength? What's one obstacle you've overcome? I wanted to say something real, you know. A few jurors leaned in. Then I heard tires behind me. No lights. Just screeching. His voice stayed calm, but the memory swelled in his eyes. I turned, confused. Then he was on me. I didn't even see his face. I was on the ground so fast I thought I'd been hit by the car. My lip cracked open when I hit the curb. Tyree touched his mouth unconsciously. He yelled, "Stop resisting," but I wasn't moving. I didn't understand what was happening. He called me a suspect. But I hadn't seen anyone. I hadn't talked to anyone. Just me, walking. The courtroom remained frozen. I tried to ask him why. I said I didn't do anything. I told him my name. I asked him to check my ID. He didn't care. He just kept saying, "You people never learn." Gasps echoed. Even the judge blinked. Cade stepped back slightly, letting the moment breathe. Tyree continued. He took my phone. He said I was probably deleting evidence. He never asked where I worked, where I was going. Nothing. Just cuffed me. Slammed me again when I asked to call my mom. He looked straight ahead now, voice firmer. I wasn't afraid of the cop. I was afraid of disappearing. The room held its breath. Of being a name no one remembered. Another black kid who made the news for 2 days, then vanished under paperwork in silence. I wasn't afraid of going to jail. I was afraid of not making it out. Not because of what I did, but because I didn't do anything. And that makes people like me dangerous. Lena sobbed quietly in the gallery, clutching her coat. Cade whispered, "You're doing great." Tyree looked at Lawson, seated in the corner now. The once proud detective wouldn't meet his gaze. I've been called angry, defiant, uncooperative. But I wasn't angry until I saw how easy it was for the truth to disappear. Until I saw how hard my mom had to fight just to make anyone, listen. He shifted, searching for the jury's eyes again. You saw that footage, you saw me walking. You saw what he did. You saw what I didn't do. If that's still not enough for justice, then what is— Dead silence. Cade stepped forward. Thank you, Tyree. No further questions. The judge nodded solemnly. Prosecution? Glenn rose slowly. No questions, Your Honor. There was nothing left to attack. The footage, the witnesses, the history. Now, only truth remained. Mr. Collins, you may step down, the judge said. Tyree rose. He walked past Cade, Their eyes met briefly, no smile, no fist bump, just a nod, a warrior's nod, and then he returned to his seat beside Lena, who gripped his hand so tightly, it trembled. The judge took a moment, adjusting his notes. Members of the jury, you will now retire for deliberation. You are instructed not to consult media, discuss the case with anyone outside this room, or access external information. Your decision must be unanimous. You may proceed. The jury filed out slowly, each face marked with the weight of what they'd just heard. None of them looked away from Tyree as they passed. The bailiff closed the door behind them, and the silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was waiting. Cade exhaled deeply. He rubbed his hands together, more nervous now than during any cross-examination. The battle was done. Now the system would either wake or yawn and roll over. Lena leaned in, whispering to Cade. Do you think they felt it? He answered without looking. They couldn't miss it. The question is, will they dare to act on it? Minutes passed. 10, 15. The room remained still. A news alert buzzed on someone's phone in the gallery, muted quickly, but not before someone read the headline aloud in a whisper. Trial of Tyree Collins. Now national conversation on systemic injustice. Cade's phone buzzed too. This time a message from Amani. Media's camped outside. Twitter's on fire. They're calling Tyree the boy who made the badge blink. He put it away. None of it mattered yet. Only the verdict. Then, suddenly, the jury door opened. Too soon. Far too soon. The judge straightened in surprise. Counselors, please rise. Cade stood. So did D.A. Glenn. The jurors returned to their seats. Expressions unreadable. The forewoman, a soft-spoken black woman, in her early 50s, rose and handed the folded verdict form to the bailiff. He passed it to the judge. The judge opened it. He paused. Read. Reread. Then nodded. The form was passed back. The judge looked up. Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict? The forewoman nodded. Yes, Your Honor. He nodded back. Please stand. Cade held his breath. Tyree gripped his mother's hand again. The judge cleared his throat and looked directly at Tyree. In the matter of the state of Georgia versus Tyree Collins, we, the jury, find the defendant. A loud bang cut him off. Someone burst into the courtroom. A uniformed officer. Pale, sweating. Your Honor, he panted, holding up a folder. There's something you need to see. Right now. The bailiff moved quickly, whispering something urgent into Judge Halbrook's ear, as the officer passed him the folder, hands trembling, sweat staining the collar of his uniform. The room held its collective breath as the judge scanned the contents, his brow creasing deeper with each page. Cade Whitaker leaned in slightly, watching the color drain from the judge's face. Lena clutched Tyree's hand tighter. Tyree sat frozen, his pulse pounding so loudly it echoed in his ears. Your Honor? The forewoman asked, still standing, the verdict unread. The judge raised a hand, silencing the room with a gesture. He took a long breath, then nodded once. Thank you, officer, he said gravely, handing the folder to the clerk. Turning back to the jury, he nodded. You may proceed. The forewoman looked down at the paper, her voice steady despite the tension clamping the room. In the matter of the state of Georgia versus Tyree Collins, we, the jury, find the defendant. A pause. Not guilty on all charges. Gasps. Then silence. Then a sudden eruption of breath. Loud, disbelieving, some joyous, others stunned. Lena broke into tears, covering her mouth. Cade closed his eyes and clenched his fist slowly, relief colliding with exhaustion. Imani, seated behind the defense table, buried her head in her arms and wept softly. But Tyree didn't move. For a long second, he simply sat there, as if the words hadn't reached him. Then, finally, a single tear slid down his cheek. His breath hitched, and the dam broke. He cried, not out of joy, but out of the weight he'd been forced to carry. The lies, the silence, the cage of suspicion built around his skin. And now, the door was open, but the scars were still fresh. Cade reached for his shoulder. You stood taller than they ever expected, he said quietly. You made them see you. Tyree wiped his face and nodded. But deep inside he already felt what was coming next. The judge thanked the jury and dismissed them. Cameras were barred from the courtroom, but phones buzzed. Tweets exploded. The headline had already posted before the court clerk adjourned the session. Tyree Collins acquitted. Atlanta trial ends in explosive not guilty verdict. But outside the courthouse, another narrative was waiting. A crowd had formed, Signs, uniforms, chants. Not the kind Tyree had seen on Instagram in support of victims. This crowd wore blue. Their signs read, "Back the badge. Support our officers. Justice for Brent. Tyree attacked our brother." The chant was loud, rhythmic, and ugly. "He got away because of politics. Where's the justice for the real victim? Let the jury try wearing a uniform." Cade stepped in front of Lena and Tyree as they exited under guard. "Keep your heads down. Don't speak. Let them yell." News cameras panned between the protesters and the newly acquitted team, searching for any sign of retaliation. A headline. A stumble. Tyree kept his face blank. He felt exposed all over again, like a wound still unhealed, now on display. The threats didn't end there. At home they found flyers on the windshield of Lena's car. "You may have won this time, but we never forget." Spray paint on the garage door. "Cop hater lives here." His school, the one where he had ranked in the top 5%, sent an email the next morning. "Due to the high-profile nature of your legal situation, and in the interest of campus safety, we cannot re-enroll you at this time. A review may be considered next academic year." Melvin's Market, his after-school job, followed up with a polite but final message. "We regret to inform you that your previous position has been permanently filled. We wish you all the best in your future endeavors." Tyree sat on the front steps that afternoon, head between his knees, backpack untouched beside him. The world hadn't changed. The courtroom gave him a verdict, but not a future. Lena brought him a sandwich and sat next to him. She didn't speak. She didn't offer advice. She just placed her hand on his back and left it there. That night, Cade returned to debrief them. Documents to sign, civil filings to prepare, and news of possible counter-investigations against Lawson. "You may be free," he said, "but this won't stop here. The city's still protecting its own. There's talk of disciplinary review boards, but not termination. Not yet." Tyree nodded. "I figured." Cade watched him for a moment. "Most people would be celebrating." "I don't feel like celebrating," Tyree replied. He walked across the room, grabbed a notebook from the kitchen counter, and opened it. Inside were sketches, notes, a timeline of the trial, quotes from Cade, terms he didn't know before: perjury, chain of custody, due process, now carefully defined in the margins. Cade frowned. "What is that?" "My future," Tyree said. Cade blinked. "Come again?" "I want to study law," Tyree said. His voice was quiet, but unshakable. "I want to learn every rule they used to try to bury me. I want to use them like you did." Lena sat up straighter. "To do what?" Cade asked. Tyree met his eyes. "To defend kids like me, the ones they don't expect to speak, the ones they assume won't survive long enough to testify." The room went still. Then Cade smiled. It wasn't the smug grin he sometimes wore in court. It was something rarer, something closer to pride. "You sure about that?" "I've never been more sure about anything." Cade walked to his briefcase, pulled out a folder. "Then we better get started." As Cade handed Tyree a law prep packet, his phone rang. "Unknown number," he answered. A voice whispered, "This isn't over, and if you don't back off, you won't make it to college." Then the line went dead. For the first time in months, Tyree Collins woke up with something that felt like purpose. Not survival, not fear, but direction. In the 2 weeks since the verdict, he and Cade had begun meeting daily in the back office of a local community center, a narrow room with mismatched chairs, one whiteboard, and a cracked window that let in more noise than light. But it didn't matter. They were building something, together. The group was called Court of Us. It wasn't just a slogan. It was a vow, a network, a line in the sand. Their mission: free legal guidance and defense coordination for Black and brown teens wrongfully accused across Georgia. It started small. Cade used what remained of his old connections: law students, ex-public defenders, a couple of retired judges who were too bitter to stay quiet. Tyree handled the outreach. He visited high schools, boys' clubs, church youth nights, not to tell war stories, but to explain what rights sounded like when spoken aloud, what silence could cost, and how surviving the system meant understanding how it hunted. He became a voice. And strangely, in that same time, Brent Lawson disappeared. No press release, no interviews, just a single line in an APD internal memo. Detective Brent Lawson has been placed on administrative suspension pending investigation. But Cade had sources. He learned that Lawson had quietly been asked to surrender his badge and sidearm. The union was furious. The department was splintering. His name was a cancer now, not because he was wrong, but because he had been caught. Jalen, meanwhile, was speaking everywhere. Local news stations, rallies, education panels. He didn't cry when he told his story. He didn't shake. He told it like fact, like breath. My father taught me to fear who I was, he would say. But I'm done fearing. I'm done pretending his badge ever protected me. And every time he finished, someone in the audience would stand, applaud, often cry. Sometimes it was a student. Sometimes it was an officer. The movement was real now. But while Tyree's calendar filled, Cade's body slowed. At first it was just a cough, then fatigue, then a strange episode in the middle of a training session with new volunteers. He brushed it off. Old bones, he muttered. Too much coffee, not enough green stuff. Tyree didn't believe him. He noticed the tremor in Cade's hands, the way he stared too long at staircases, the shortness of breath that came after only a few steps. Then came the collapse. They were in Macon, Georgia, speaking to a crowd of 300 at a school district conference. Cade had just wrapped one of his signature speeches, blistering, poetic, unapologetic. And if you don't see the broken floor under these kids, don't you dare blame them for falling through it. The crowd erupted in applause. Cade stepped off the podium, smiled briefly at Tyree. Then his face went blank, and he fell. Tyree rushed to his side, catching his head before it hit the wood. Cade! Cade, hey! Hey, stay with me. Paramedics arrived fast. They lifted him gently, placed an oxygen mask over his mouth, and wheeled him out. Tyree followed the ambulance all the way to Grady Memorial. He waited, prayed, refused to sit. And hours later, a doctor approached with eyes already apologizing. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, she said softly. Advanced, unresponsive to earlier treatments, which he didn't tell anyone about. I'm sorry. Tyree felt like the air had been pulled from his lungs. How long? Months. At best, she said. Weeks if he keeps pushing himself. Cade woke up later that night. The machines beeped softly around him. His face looked older now, weathered not just by time but by surrender. But his eyes still had fire. Tyree sat beside him, silent. You knew, he said finally. Cade nodded. For a while. Why didn't you say anything? Cade smiled faintly. Because there was still work to do. Tyree's eyes burned. You're the reason I'm not in prison. You're the reason I found my voice. No, Cade said, reaching for his hand. You were always loud. I just helped the world stop muting you. He coughed long, rattling. Tyree stood, gripping his shoulder until it passed. You can't go yet, Tyree said. We're just getting started. Cade's lips twitched. Then finish it. You. Jalen. The next kid. The one after that. Build a defense army so strong they think twice before lying again. Tyree wiped his eyes. I don't want to do this without you. Cade's voice cracked now too. That's how I know you'll do it right. The next morning, Tyree returned to their office. He didn't cry. He didn't cancel events. He worked. He called every volunteer, reassigned cases, contacted donors. He added Cade's name to the front of the office door. Whitaker Collins Legal Justice Initiative. Home of Court of Us. He started something else too. A campaign. Scholarships for exonerated youth. A fund for teens who had been wrongfully arrested, profiled or suspended due to police interactions. Lena helped him organize it. Jalen helped him write the launch speech. And at the first press conference, standing in front of a banner that bore Cade's old courtroom sketch, Tyree said, Cade gave me the law. Now I'm giving it back to those who never had it. 2 days later, Tyree entered Cade's hospital room with new case files. But the bed was empty. Only a sealed envelope remained on the pillow. Written in Cade's shaky handwriting. Don't mourn. Finish the war. The envelope sat unopened on Tyree's nightstand for 3 days. He couldn't bring himself to tear it open, not because he feared what it would say, but because doing so would mean accepting the inevitable. Cade Whitaker was gone. No more urgent phone calls in the middle of the night. No more battle plans scribbled across diner napkins. No more slow, gravel-toned lectures that somehow made Tyree feel both protected and challenged. But eventually Tyree opened the letter. It wasn't long. Just a single page, typed, except for the signature, written in Cade's familiar, scratchy pen. Tyree, if you're reading this, I'm finally done borrowing time. Don't mourn. Finish the war. You were never meant to just survive. You were meant to lead. And when the world tries to break your clients the way it once tried to break you, stand, speak, fight. I didn't save you. You saved yourself. But now it's your turn to do the saving. Oh, and one last thing. You'll pass the LSAT. I made sure of it. Proud of you, kid. Cade Whitaker. Tyree read it 3 times. Then the next morning, he signed up for the exam. The months that followed blurred into one long stretch of grief, study, and transformation. Cade had left behind more than memories. He left a framework, a legal blueprint inside Tyree's mind. And with every test prep question, Tyree heard Cade's voice in his head. Don't just memorize the rule. Ask who the rule protects and who it punishes. The law is like a knife. It can cut corruption or kill truth, depending on who holds it. Fight clean, but never fight soft. On the day of the LSAT, Tyree walked into the testing center wearing a worn gray suit that Cade once gave him. A note was still folded inside the jacket pocket. You wear this the day you become dangerous. He didn't just pass. He aced it. A near-perfect score. Offers came. Letters poured in. But Tyree already knew where he'd go. Southern Justice Law Center. The very school Cade once lectured at before being blackballed. The dean greeted Tyree personally, placing a folder in his hands with a scholarship inside. At orientation, his desk bore a fresh nameplate, Tyree Whitaker, legal intern. He'd legally changed his name, not to erase his past, but to honor his resurrection. The story of the trial had become legend by now. Cordovas had expanded into 4 more cities. Jalen had taken over the Atlanta chapter, working full-time as a legal researcher and youth advocate. And just as Tyree's future was rising, Brent Lawson's was finally crashing. An unrelated brutality case, similar to Tyree's, had resurfaced thanks to one of Amani's investigative exposés. This time there was no jury confusion. The footage was raw, brutal, and unmistakable. Lawson was convicted, sentenced to 14 years for aggravated assault and falsification of evidence. Tyree didn't attend the sentencing. He didn't need to. Justice didn't require his presence. It only required his persistence. The real work, Cade had always said, begins after the noise dies down. Terry remembered those words the morning he was assigned. His first official case as a legal intern. His supervisor slid a manila folder across the desk. You're the only one who can handle this one, without making the boy feel like he's already guilty. Tyree opened the folder. Client, Malik Richardson. Age, charge, assault on law enforcement officer. Plea, not guilty. His stomach sank. A different name. A different town. But the same script. Black boy. Hoodie. Confused. Slam. Now sitting in juvenile holding for threatening a cop with his hands in his pockets. Tyree closed the folder slowly. The past was repeating. But this time he wasn't the boy in the chair. He was the voice on the other side of the table. He stood, grabbed his notepad, and turned to the door. Before he left, he paused at the wall outside his office. A single framed photo hung there, taken the day after his trial ended. In it, Cade and Tyree stood side by side. Cade's arm over his shoulder. A single line printed underneath. Justice is not a moment. It's a legacy. As Tyree entered the interview room, he saw Malik sitting in a corner, staring at the floor. Shoes untied, cuffs too tight around his wrists. Tyree pulled out the chair across from him. Didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. The boy looked up, unsure, waiting for judgment. Instead, Tyree gave him a nod. The same nod Cade once gave him. Tyree opened his notepad and said, Malik, I believe you. The boy blinked in disbelief. Then, slowly, he whispered, Are you really my lawyer? Tyree smiled. No, I'm your defender. Black screen. Fade to credits. If you've ever felt the weight of being judged before you speak, if you've seen a system punish skin before actions, then you know Tyree's story isn't rare. It's real. Type yes if you believe no kid should have to prove their humanity to be free. Subscribe if this broke your heart, and you're ready to make sure it never happens again.